Hey everyone, welcome to the show where we discuss current legal events and legal hot topics from the perspective of a seasoned attorney such as myself. Now, today is part two of our segment on democracy, which is entitled, Is Our Democracy in Danger? And again, this is part two. Now, in case you missed part one, we discussed the legal definition of democracy, and we also discussed the four criteria that are present in modern day democracies, and we also discussed the type of government that our modern day democracy may be at risk of falling into, and that is a authoritarian type of government. And we also discuss the four criteria that accompany authoritarian types of government. So now that we have reviewed what democracy is and the hallmarks of both democracies and authoritarian types of government, which in our current legal climate, and I say legal climate because politics is in the parameter of the legal climate. And when I say politics, I'm going to define that word. Um, and I'm taking the definition from Black's Law Dictionary. So, according to Black's Law Dictionary, politics is the science of the organization and administration of the state. That's one definition, and it gives two. So, the second definition is the activity or profession of engaging in political affairs. Okay, so we are looking at Aristotle's political theory on how democracies may deteriorate into other forms of government. So now that we have summarized part one, let's go ahead and get right into part two and start analyzing Aristotle's theory on how democracies deteriorate into other types of government. And again, just as a reminder, Aristotle's theory is based on a democracy devolving into some other type of government that's not going to be a constitutional based type of government. I just want to kind of give you a foundation of where these factors really come from. So, Aristotle wrote a book, it's called The Politics, and in The Politics, he discusses political theories. We are adjusting Aristotle's theory to our current political environment. And you'll see that in just a few minutes when we start looking at some of the events that are occurring in our political and legal climate. And then we're going to compare them against Aristotle's theory. So now we're going to dive into Aristotle's theory and the 12 factors that I have taken out of the politics and also from political ideologies and the democratic ideal. All right, so let's take a look at Aristotle's factors. So there are 12 factors listed. I'm going to go ahead and remove the ticker so that you, for a moment, so that you can see the last factor. So factor number 12 there is pretensions, and I'm going to put the ticker back on. And so there are 12 factors that I have taken out of Aristotle's theory. And so you'll see that for each factor, there's going to be a word or a phrase in bold writing, and then you'll see that there's going to be a sentence that follows that word or phrase. And so the word or phrase that is in bold writing, that indicates that that is a word or phrase that was taken directly out of Aristotle's The Politics, and more specifically, Book 5. The sentence case writing that is a paraphrase of the factor. So, for example, if we look at number 1, it says intrigue. And so that is the factor that I've taken out of Aristotle's The Politics. And then we'll see that it's followed by a sentence, and it says, the people are persuaded that their democracy is in grave danger from a real or imagined enemy. And that's what I mean by the words in sentence case. And that is a paraphrase of Aristotle's factor. And I've taken these paraphrased factors from a book that was written by what I believe are political science professors. And this book is Political Ideologies and the Democratic Ideal. Political Ideologies and the Democratic Ideal. And this is the ninth edition. And I'll put a link in the description below in case you want to read from the political ideologies. And also, I will also put a link in the description to um, the translation that I used of Aristotle's The Politics. So once we get through the factors today, what I'll do then is for each factor, I will actually create an episode devoted to that factor. And I will pull current events, current legal issues, and legal events from the headlines, and then compare and contrast how those headlines fit in line with Aristotle's theory. So with that being said, now let's actually look at the factors. Okay, so the first factor is, as I mentioned, intrigue. And honestly, this one should be pretty self-explanatory. To paraphrase this factor, a demagogue will persuade the people that their democracy is in grave danger from a real or imagined enemy. And so that's the word that Aristotle used, demagogue. At least that's the word that's used in the translation that I'm reading. And so let's talk about what is a demagogue. So a demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the feelings of ordinary people rather than by using actual facts or political policy. Okay? And so throughout this episode, we are going to use the word crafty politician instead of demagogue, just so we're not using these fancy words. And then you'll see that I have in parentheses, uh, for example, fear mongering. And so in a later episode, we are going to actually discuss this factor of election intrigue and discuss this in more detail. So if you're interested in seeing that, definitely stay tuned. Now, the second factor is intemperate demagogue. And so again, we know that means an intemperate politician or a crafty politician. So this factor is paraphrased as a person or group that endears themselves to the people as a friend or a savior. So the intemperate politician will endear themselves to the people as a friend or a savior. And so when we look at the politics, what Aristotle is saying is that this intemperate politician is going to stir up the people in such a manner that it stirs the people against the democracy, even though at that point in time the people don't realize that they are being stirred up. They may not realize that they are being stirred up against the democracy. And again, we're going to discuss this in further detail in a later episode. Okay, so now the third factor is fear. Okay, and so fear is paraphrased as the intemperate politician will start a war against a real or imagined enemy based on fake or false reasons. And so you see here I have in parentheses example fake news. And if we look at our political climate even just a decade ago, you wouldn't have even heard the term fake news. So that's just something to take note of. Okay? And so if we look at what Aristotle was saying, as it relates to fear, Aristotle theorized that either politicians will be fearful of punishment or retribution for a wrong that politician has committed, or politicians or people will be expecting to suffer a wrong and therefore they will be fearful of retaliation from their enemies. So that's what Aristotle means by fear. But again, this has been paraphrased to align with our current political climate as starting a war against real or imagined enemies based on false or fake reasons. Okay. And so the next factor is carelessness. And so by carelessness, what Aristotle means is a form of government may change because the voters are careless. And by what he means by that is that they vote either based on partisanship. So instead of voting on legitimate political issues, they vote on um, partisan issues, or they vote on issues that are not of substance. He also means, but he further means by carelessness is that whole device by which people vote based on fear, or they vote based on feelings, or they vote based on something other than political policy and political issues, that people will inadvertently elect what Aristotle refers to as disloyal persons. What he means by disloyal persons is better explained by what I have listed here in the parenthetical, which is the example of, for example, undermining the Constitution, expanding power into areas previously off limits. And so when we take that together, what that means is that a disloyal politician is someone who will undermine the Constitution. A disloyal politician is someone who is going to expand their power, political power, into an area that was previously off limits. And this accompanies the factor of carelessness, because that disloyal politician will have been voted in a careless manner. Okay. But also the politician is also behaving in a careless manner. All right. So that's the theme or the factor of carelessness. Now, next, factor number 5, we have deceive into acquiescence. So what Aristotle is saying here is that sometimes people will be persuaded to act in a certain manner, but they will be persuaded through deceptive means. So they will agree. When I say acquiesce, that means they will go along with something. So they will be persuaded to go along with something in a deceptive manner, which that means that if they really had the true facts, they probably wouldn't agree. But since they don't have all the information, they therefore do agree and go along with it. And so that's why we see that this is paraphrased as withholding information and practicing censorship. For example, banning books. And there's honestly, we are seeing a lot more censorship in this political environment, or just, I'll say, in this political environment than we have seen in quite some time. And so, and again, all of these factors are going to be discussed in their own separate episode. So, next is factor number 6, neglect about trifles slash enmity. Okay, so trifles means small things. So, and then enmity means an intense feeling of hatred towards someone, especially when the feeling is mutual. When the feeling is mutual. Antagonism. That's one definition. And then the other definition is the quality, state, or condition of being an enemy, mutual hostility. All right. So this is paraphrased as sowing dissension and creating arguments over real or imagined issues or issues of little or no importance. And you see here I have an example. I have critical race theory in the parentheses, and there's a reason for that, and I will get into that in that particular episode. Now, factor number 7, the crafty politician will seek to enlist the masses. So what Aristotle means is that the crafty politician use political will use political devices, will use deceptive political devices to get as many people as he can on board with his position, whether his position is right or wrong. And in doing so, because of whenever you see deception, that's always a good indication that someone is doing something wrong. And therefore, there will typically be consequences that will implicate as many people as possible in their crimes, so that those individuals are now guilty of the same thing. And unfortunately, I have an example of this. And just like all the other factors, we'll see that in a separate episode. So, factor number 8 is evil persuasion. And what Aristotle means by evil persuasion is that he will enlist other individuals, maybe other politicians or other people, maybe officials who work in another part of the government. He will enlist other people and kind of recruit them on board with his program. And he'll do that by providing them with some type of goodwill for helping him. And that will create allegiance. So when I say goodwill, that means they get some type of benefit. It's kind of like a quid pro quo. Okay, so they get some type of benefit, and that benefit creates allegiance. And so that's why you'll see in parentheses I have here, creates goodwill and allegiance for the guilty. Okay, and so this evil persuasion is paraphrased as subverting the administration of justice by altering the Constitution and putting innocent people on trial while letting the guilty go free. So let's look at our next factor, which is factor number 9, and that is injustice. To paraphrase injustice, the crafty politician uses the courts and other government agencies to help his friends and hurt his enemies. Aristotle lists examples of things that would have happened in his political climate, the political climate of his day. But again, that was more than 2,000 years ago. So we are going to review and discuss how this manifests in our current political climate. And again, that'll be in a subsequent episode. And so next we have factor number 10, which is curry favor. This one is a bit similar to number 9, except for it doesn't necessarily involve the courts and government agencies, but at the same time, it is still similarly manipulating to help their friends and hurt their enemies, but also at the same time, distracting the people with spectacles and entertainment. So you see here that I have in parentheses, busing migrants all over the country. Because when I say curry favor, for example, again in Book 5, Aristotle says that the crafty politician might wrong notable people. And that's in order to curry favor with the common people. Or that the crafty politician might wrong the notable people in such a manner that they might be able to force them, those notables, to then combine with their position. and thereby currying favor with the people. And so that's why that's referred to as curry favor. I know when you see curry favor and then it says distracts the people with spectacles and entertainment, that doesn't really make sense, but we have to see this from the manner in which Aristotle was presenting it. And hopefully it'll make more sense when we actually discuss that episode. So that brings us to our last factor, which is avarice. So first, let me define what avarice is. Avarice is extreme greed. Okay. And so by avarice, Aristotle means that the crafty politician will make their gains at the expense of other individuals or the public, which is what I've been referring to as the people throughout this episode. And so we see that this is paraphrased as making some loyal by making them rich at public expense. And so our last factor is pretensions, which is paraphrased as maintaining the facade of being religious or being a just leader while spending recklessly. And so what Aristotle theorized is that if a crafty politician can convince the people that he is religious, the people will be more inclined to trust him because they will believe that he will be less inclined to perpetrate an injustice against them. And so we'll discuss that more in detail as well in a episode in the future. And so that concludes our review of Aristotle's factors from his theory on how democracies may fail. And so if you're interested in getting more information on these 12 factors, then stay tuned for further episodes where we discuss each of these factors in detail. So you'll definitely want to go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you then.